Hey, what's up, everybody? I am back at it. I was away from work for a few days, so obviously I did not clock in and out during that time. And then I tried to do a video on Friday night of last week, but it was too long for me to be able to upload it directly from my phone to YouTube. So good lesson learned there. And that is part of the reason why I just clocked off episode 4 is going to be part 1 and a part 2 for the first time ever. This is just a meaty meatball of a topic that one of my best friends told me about, and that it touches on a lot of things that have been on my mind for a long time. So I'm probably going to talk a decent amount about this. The topic in question is a little hot take from the Dominique Foxworth Show, which is a great podcast. I really like Dominique. I typically really like his co-host slash producer Charlie. Every once in a while will throw out some real zingers. He'll put some spice on the ball with these hot takes that he throws out. And one of the ones that he gave out recently was the idea that Achilles injuries are the thing that are enforcing parity in the NBA. As I've mentioned before, I'm a big NBA fan, so this is something that I've thought about a lot. And the way I'm going to structure this, I'm going to do part 1 focusing on the injuries part of it, and then part 2 focused on the parity part of this take. So we'll start with the injuries. This year, we can go back to 2016 to see, high profile Achilles injuries. That's when Kobe Bryant tore his Achilles and still made the free throws, which was gangster shit. I mean, I'm not a huge Kobe fan, but whatever you think of him, that's hardcore. That was really impressive that he did that. So rest in peace, Kobe and Gianna. That was fucking dope. 2019, Kevin Durant tears his Achilles in the finals. And that was kind of the first, at least that I can remember, the first big connection between the calf strain on the injury report and an eventual Achilles tear, because that's what happened to KD. He reportedly had a calf strain in the Rockets series that year. And then when the Warriors were down 3-1 in the finals, he tried to come back. I think he scored like 11 points. He was like 4 of 5 or 5 of 6 or something. He was scoring very well, actually. And then he tore his Achilles in the game. So that's the next one. And again, that's where you get the link between the calf and the Achilles, which makes sense. Obviously they're close together. Your soleus muscle, which is the, I think the technical term is the inferior muscle of your calf. It's underneath your gastroc, which is the big calf muscle that connects directly into your Achilles tendon. So got a problem with your calf, good chance you're going to have a problem with your Achilles. So that makes sense. After that, we go to, Klay Thompson tore his Achilles while he was trying to come back from having already torn his ACL in that same series when Kevin Durant tore his Achilles. And then this past year had a whole spate of Achilles injuries. In the regular season, DeJounte Murray tore his Achilles. I think that was in January. That was just kind of the capper on a nightmare season for the Pelicans. So just wanted to throw that in there, but it's certainly not the thing that Charlie was talking about, and not, kind of disconnected from the other 3. The other 3 were all in the playoffs. So we had Dame Lillard, who tore his Achilles in the first round against the Pacers. We had Jason Tatum, who tore his Achilles in the second round against the Knicks. And then you had Tyrese Halliburton, who tore his Achilles, of course, in Game 7 of the NBA Finals, which was really sad. I mean, it was shaping up to be an awesome game. It still turned out to be really good. Benedict Mathurin was crazy in the second half of that game, but it looked like it was going to be like a heavyweight fight, and it didn't turn out to be that way. So let's look at those 3 playoff injuries. Let's focus on those. So the Dame injury, what do we see there? Dame is an older player. I think he's like 34, 35 now at this point. Might be even older than that. He might be like 36, 37. I think he's like, I think he's like 37. I'd have to look that up. This is making me look unprepared. But so Dame's an older player. He's a small guard. He's got a lot of miles on his body. And he tried to come back mid-season. He had a blood clotting issue, which is really scary even for just a regular person, let alone a professional athlete. And then he tried to come back from that and ramp back up for a playoff series against a team that plays really hard and really, really fast in the Indiana Pacers. So, and Dame is a kind of a defensive liability to begin with. In those circumstances, of course, he's gonna get picked on. So I think that's a big factor to keep in mind, is that he tried to ramp back up from being out for an extended period of time all the way trying to get into playoff shape, which, if a regular season game, let's say a regular season game in the NBA now is like a 6.5 out of 10 relative exertion, a playoff game, especially in these playoffs, like the gap between the playoffs and the regular season was insane. I mean, like, people were going at it. So like a playoff game is like, honestly, probably like a normal playoff game is probably like beyond a 10 out of 10. It's probably like an 11 out of 10. So you're talking about trying to go from missing time with a serious medical condition to 11 out of 10 intensity. That's going to put a lot of stress on your body. Going off of that, let's get into Jason Tatum. He was in maybe the most physical playoff series of them all in the first round against the Magic. And then he eventually tears his Achilles in the second round against the Knicks. Tatum is an Iron Man. He plays a ton of games. I think he's played more than 75 games like every year of his career, that it was a normal length season at least. He plays all the time, and he plays big minutes. He does a lot of stuff for the Celtics. He will play point guard if that's what they need. He'll protect the rim. He'll defend the other team's best wing player. He does everything. He puts a lot of work in on the court. And he also, along with Tyrese Haliburton, played on the Olympic team last year. Neither of these guys were the main players on the Olympic team, but it's still, they were still out there. They were still playing high-level basketball in the Olympics and against their teammates in practice. And because of that, they don't get a full off season. Tatum won the title last year. Haliburton got to the conference finals last year. They lost in I'm going to use one of the funniest phrases to me, a really competitive sweep. Which, yeah, I mean, all those games were close, but that's just a funny notion to me. But regardless, both these guys had long seasons last year. They didn't really get an off season over the summer, and then they come back and they have long seasons again. Haliburton especially making it all the way to Game 7 of the finals. So let's look at that, and let's look at that in context with the Dame injury. Dame is an older player, so a lot of miles on the tires there throughout his career. Tatum and Haliburton both had really, really long seasons last year, and then long seasons again this year, and really no off season in between. And then let's talk about the intensity aspect of it. Like I said, if let's say a regular season NBA game is 6.5 out of 10, the playoff game is like 11 out of 10, especially considering some of the teams that these guys played. The Magic were super physical. The Pacers went through a gauntlet, especially in the late rounds. The Knicks were not as nasty as they were in the last couple of years, but still a hard series. And then obviously Oklahoma City is a nightmare team to play against. So I think that kind of juxtaposition between kind of easy regular season games and just insanely intense playoff games is a really big factor here. Because if you think about the idea of super compensation, which is kind of a fundamental concept in sports science, your recovery needs to be proportional to the effort. If you have a workout, or in this case a game that's like a 6.5 out of 10 intensity, then your recovery curve is going to go down like this. It's not going to go super duper deep for you to be able to recover and then come back again. Whereas if you are playing these like 11 out of 10 playoff games, then you need a lot of recovery and then to be able to go again. And so in the playoffs, it's basically the same amount of rest in between games as it is in the regular season, but these games are way, way harder. So that's just a recipe for injuries. You're not giving people time to recover. And to me, what that says, and I could easily be wrong on this, I'm not an expert. I have a basic knowledge of this, but I'm not an expert by any means. But to me, the solution seems like it might be to kind of unwind some of the schedule changes the NBA has made in recent years, because if you're going to have less intense regular season games, then you don't need the extra rest as much. So in recent years, the NBA has done a really concerted job of getting rid of back-to-backs, 4 games at 5 nights, that sort of thing. And I just don't think that's really worth it, because I mean, a lot of guys skip a bunch of games anyway. And, you know, so if you're giving yourself even more rest in between lower effort games, and then when you get to the playoffs, you just don't have the capacity, and then you don't give the players the time to recover. So to me, it might be better to condense the regular season schedule again, and then if you're going to have these crazy intense playoff games, put an extra day in between. You know, in the first round, make it like 3 days in between games instead of 2. And then in the middle rounds, it can be 2 instead of 1. And then obviously the finals has plenty of rest anyway. But you know, by that time, you've already done a lot of damage. So that's where I'm going to end off part 1. Hopefully this is not too long for me to upload. We'll see.